Welcome, everybody. Anybody here for the first time tonight? Welcome, Alex. Welcome, everybody else. Welcome, anybody joining us on Zoom for the first time. Directions. I'd like to start class by asking you to have a short discussion with some other people in the room, to meet people in service of Against the Stream being a place not only where you meditate, but where you develop community and start to get familiar and connected with the other participants. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the Buddhists' emphasis on inquiry and questioning, and I don't know exactly where the talk will go, but about the importance of questioning your own mind, questioning your own views and opinions, questioning society's views and opinions, questioning religion, questioning teachers, the importance of not that Buddhism, I feel like, is maybe one of the few religions that really encourages a kind of healthy skepticism, even about its own teachings. I'm going to share this teaching that the Buddha gave to the Kalamas, where people said, like, well, why should we believe you? There was some other enlightened guy here trying to sell us on his path last week, or that's what they said at the Christian church, or at the mosque, or at the temple, or whatever it is. Why should we believe Buddhism? And this very kind of open encouragement to not take teachings on blind faith. So I'm going to talk about that tonight, but also just like not believing our own opinions and our own views and our own, that self-centered human condition that we're all in, where we always think we're right. Don't you pretty much always, whatever you believe, you pretty much think like, I'm probably right all of the time. And so maybe for the small groups, reflect for a moment on, some time in your life where you were really convinced that you were right. And you were really kind of stuck in a view and an opinion, and you later came to change that. And to kind of, as you look back on yourself and you'd be like, I can't believe how ignorant I used to be, how confused I was when I really believed this or that. And I didn't question it at the time. That's what I thought. And so that's what I believed. So reflecting on some of the times where you didn't quite question your own views and opinions, you didn't question the emotions, there's like, I don't know if this is a good example. I was thinking there's a kind of classic example of like you're walking through the forest or the neighborhood or whatever it is, and you have the experience of seeing a snake, and you have all of the fear of seeing a snake, and you think you're going to get bitten. Maybe you think you hear a rattler or whatever, and then you pause and you realize it was just a branch, or it was a piece of rope, or it was a garden hose or something like that. But you really believed that you had all of the experience based on this. I really believe that was a threat to me, and it was no threat at all. I had all of this fear. I had all of this maybe anger. And then I realized it was just, I was pissed off at the garden hose, or at the piece of rope, or the stick, or whatever it was. So what's a time in your life where you later realize that your mind isn't all that trustworthy and should have questioned your view, your opinion, your emotion a little bit more thoroughly before being convinced? So small groups in questioning, experiences of questioning yourself, your mind. 2 or 3 people in the room, preferably that you don't know, so that you meet some new people rather than just talking to your friends. And at home, I'll put you in breakout rooms, which is random. You might get stuck with the same people every time, but it's just random. So the main meditation instruction we call mindfulness. There's lots of different meditation techniques, but the main one, because it's the one that the Buddha focused on most in his teachings, and that's the one in the Eightfold Path when he's talking about the path to ending suffering. It's mindfulness. 4 foundations of mindfulness is the teaching. It's the direct path to realization, to awakening. And I define mindfulness with several things. Present time awareness is the simple definition of mindfulness, is present, what's happening here and now. And rather than present moment, present time, because time is moving too quickly for there to be a moment to be like, that's it. It's the awareness of time passing, present time awareness, with a quality of kindness, bringing an attitude of friendliness, of kindness to what's happening moment to moment, present time, and non-judgmental, not looking at your experience as good or bad, not judging what's happening, non-judgmental, present time, kind. And the last piece that I might not always say, but it's very important and connected with tonight's topic, which is investigative and curious, and some you might say analytical, that there's a quality of you're using your mind to investigate what's happening, analyze what's happening. What is this? That kind of simple question, what is this? Without just being convinced that you know what's happening, getting curious about it, questioning it. Present time, non-judgmental, kind, investigative awareness. So we'll meditate for 30 minutes. I'll give some instructions, and then we'll talk about questioning and both internal and external, questioning religion and questioning politics and questioning societal norms and questioning a lot of things, and both inside and outside. So find a way to sit that's upright, relaxed, find a posture that feels sustainable. Get your meditation pose on, but release any unnecessary tension so that you're sitting in a way that's upright but relaxed, supported by the cushion, by the chair, allowing our eyes to be gently closed, shoulders relaxed, jaw released, belly soft. Present time, non-judgmental, kind, investigative awareness. The traditional way to begin this mindfulness meditation is through putting our attention on the sensations the breath creates, mindfulness of the breath, disengaging from the thinking mind, ignoring the mind, paying full attention to the breath. Breathing in, know that you're breathing in. Breathing out, know that you're breathing out. Present time awareness of breathing. Becoming curious, interested, investigate how the breath enters and exits. How does the breath create sensations? Where do you feel it? An interesting trick or technique is imagine that you are an alien consciousness that has just entered this form, rather than this being a body you've lived in your whole life. Trying to bring fresh eyes, fresh awareness to experience. Imagine that you've just embodied this form, that it wasn't so familiar. What would you experience? What would you notice? What would you feel in this living, breathing body of sensation? What does breathing feel like? What's the depth? What's the texture? Without controlling the breath, just letting this body breathe. Receiving in awareness how the body wants to breathe, whether it's deep or shallow, long or short. For now, when the attention wants to go back into thinking about the future or the past, try to disengage from those plans and memories. Come back to the body. Come back to the here and now. expanding from the narrow focus on the breath to the rest of the body, inclusive, head to toe, arms and legs, hands and feet. So many sensations in this body. And the next questioning, inquiry, investigation is into the feeling tone. What sensations are agreeable, comfortable, pleasant? What sensations are unpleasant, painful, hard to bear, hard to tolerate? And what sensations can you feel but are neither pleasant nor unpleasant? How much of the body are you aware of? You can feel arms, legs, but there's no pain or pleasure associated with that part of the body, just sensation. And opening the awareness from the physical focus to include emotions and mind states. What kind of mood is present? What kind of mood or attitude is present in your heart, mind? Is it pleasant or unpleasant in your mind right now? Or perhaps neutral? One of the most central questions, investigations, is how are things changing? How's the breath coming and going, sensations? Emotions, thoughts, arising, sustaining, changing, passing. Even the feeling tones, what is painful in one moment, a few moments later or a few minutes later, that pain often dissipates, changes, dissolves. Turning towards your mind, towards the experience of thoughts and emotions, and questioning, what is it that is aware? There's the thoughts, but what's thinking them? Where do they arise from? There's consciousness, but what is it that is conscious? What is awareness? Questioning. It can be useful to even ask ourselves, who am I? Who's thinking? Again, imagining alien life form inhabiting your mind, questioning, what are all these views and opinions? Why is this mind thinking about itself most of the time? This kind of inquiry, analysis, investigation, we're not trying to come up with answers. Just asking the questions. What's happening in the heart, in the mind, in the body? How does it feel? How's it changing? It's of course okay to keep it simple and just return to the sensations of the breath as often as feel useful, grounding, getting out of the stories in the mind, letting go of the questions, returning to the simple body awareness. For the last couple of minutes of the meditation, let go of the effort to be present. Let go of trying to be mindful. Try to just rest in what is. Rest in accepting right now it's like this. A body that feels, a mind that thinks, a heart that has emotions, sense doors that hear and see, smell and taste. This human condition that we all share. One of the reasons why Buddhism exists is because the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who we refer to as the Buddha, was really curious, was really interested in the human condition, and was quite skeptical when he started asking questions of the answers that he received. When he was young, his parents tried to hide reality from him, tried to hide the reality of sickness, aging, and death, tried to hide the reality that life is often painful and impermanent and difficult. Tried to shelter. They were helicopter parents, I think, whatever that means. And then at one point, he realized that he was being lied to by his parents, and he started questioning, and also questioning reality and questioning religion. He found out that people get sick and get old and die, and then he said, well, you know, that's going to happen to all of us. We're going to become these decrepit old people, or we're going to get diseases and die, and then what happens? And he was taught the traditional Indian view of reincarnation. He said, not, you know, and he was taught this, like, not only do you have to face sickness, aging, death, and all of the suffering of craving for pleasure and attachment and aversion that goes along with life and death, grief, sorrow. He said he was taught you do it over and over. Then you die and you do it again, and then you die and then you do it again, and you keep coming back here. And his original question is, isn't there a way to end this suffering and this, and with some, I would assume, some question of, oh, is this reincarnation thing even true? And I think that's an important question for a bunch of us Western conditioned people, rather than believing in reincarnation. Like questioning it. Is this even true? Is there, you know, a cycle? Is there a spirit, a soul, a karmic momentum that is born and that is awareness in this lifetime and then dies and continues? Is there an afterlife? Most other religions, the Western religions, talk about an eternal afterlife, forever, heaven, hell, eternity, forever. The Indian religions, both Hinduism and Buddhism, say it's not an eternal afterlife. It's a cycle of rebirth, reincarnation. And the Hindu, the traditional Indian, and the Buddhist perspective are a little bit different on that, but they kind of agree. And the Buddha questioned it, and then came around to his understanding was like, it makes sense that there's a process here beyond this physical body, that there is something that continues beyond just one lifetime, that he called a karmic momentum. And his quest and his question, the core question was, can we end this cycle? Can we end rebirth? Do we have to keep coming back here? Is there an enlightened state where we don't have to keep coming back to the suffering of humanity, to the suffering of the Buddhist world we call samsara, the world of greed and hatred and delusion? Is it possible? That was the main question that he had. And he went out and asked people, and mostly he was not satisfied with the religious teachings of his time. He questioned them, and you know, they said, well, you can sort of meditate your way into bliss, and you can have these experiences of bliss, and you can get better and better incarnations. If you're a good person, if you have good karma, you'll get a better incarnation next time. And he said, that doesn't satisfy me. That you just have to keep, is there a way off of the wheel? Is there an experience of enlightenment, of deathlessness, of nirvana? Can we actually get free? And he practiced all of those years and met wonderful teachers and learned a lot. And there's that interesting, having a conversation with somebody today that was going through some disillusionment with a teacher, which I've also gone through with teachers, many teachers over the years. And that experience of really appreciating what you've learned from somebody, but then moving on. And that's sort of like, just because they weren't right about everything, or they didn't have perfect integrity, of still being like, oh, you taught me a lot. And I feel like that was the Buddha's experience with the teachers that he came into contact with. He said, thank you so much for teaching me these meditation techniques, and I'll be going now. I'm going to keep moving because I'm not satisfied with the answers that I'm experiencing, or that I have experienced here. That temporary bliss is not what I'm seeking. Meditating my way into some oblivion, blissful state is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a sense of well-being and ease, a freedom from suffering that's not dependent on a concentrated meditative state, that I can take with me into my actions, into my speech, into my relationships. So after years, he came to the place of awakening. He said, I figured it out. And it wasn't that somebody taught me how to do it. I benefited from some of the teachings, but really he ended up rejecting pretty much, nobody had the path. Nobody taught him mindfulness. Mindfulness is one of the things that the Buddha came up with. In the scriptures, he's quoted as saying stuff like, or something like, I didn't come up with it, I rediscovered it. Mindfulness is a universal truth, and it was already there, and there were past Buddhas that knew about mindfulness. It just had been forgotten in that time, 2,600 years ago. It didn't exist in any of the Upanishads or the ancient Indian texts. It didn't exist in any of the, other spiritual traditions. I said, I rediscovered it. And so then we have Buddhism comes, and the Buddha's like very clear about this is what's true. Even the Dharma, this term, the Dharma means truth. This is what is true. The Four Noble Truths. The truth of suffering, the truth of clinging being the cause of craving, being the cause of suffering, the truth that it's possible to end suffering, the truth that there is an eightfold, there's actions that you can take, there's meditations that you can do to experience the Dharma, the truth, directly for yourself. So it's very sort of like in your face, this is what's true. And even the traditional formulation of the Eightfold Path is right thought, right intention, right speech, right livelihood, right action, right mindfulness, not wrong mindfulness, right mindfulness. You got to do it the right way. And so it's very right concentration. It's all kind of, there's a right way and a wrong way to go about this thing. And the Buddha was quite confident, and he knew the truth, and he knew the right way to do things if you want to end suffering. So it can feel a little, I know for me, when I hear like, you're telling me the truth, well, you know everything, you know the truth, you're telling me what's right and what's wrong. I think I might have a little bit of a hard time with Buddhism if they said, and you have to just believe it. So there's this famous teaching where one time the Buddha was walking with a large group of monks. It says walking on tour with a large group of monks when he came upon a town of the Kalamas called Kesaputta. The Kalamas of Kesaputta thought, it's very good indeed to see an awakened ones such as these. And so they went up to where the Buddha was, having seated themselves to one side. The Kalamas of Kesaputta said to the Buddha, there are, sir, many different teachers that come. They illustrate and illuminate their own doctrines, but the doctrines of others they put down, they revile, they disparage, and cripple. For us, sir, uncertainty arises and doubt arises concerning them. Who indeed of these venerable teachers speaks truly and who speaks falsely? And, this really important question of like questioning, like here we are in the west side of Los Angeles, and, you could go, there's a church over there, and there's a temple over there, and there's a mosque up the street, and there's yoga centers everywhere, and there's a whole bunch of new age, people teaching you like, hey, I know the truth, and everybody's wrong, but we're right. Everybody else is wrong, but we're right. Which of these teachers speaks truly and who speaks falsely? And the Buddha says, it is indeed fitting to be uncertain. It is fitting to doubt. For in a situation of uncertainty, doubts surely arise. You should decide not by what you have heard, not by following convention, not by assuming it is so, not by relying on texts, not because of reasoning, not because of logic, not by thinking about explanations, not by acquiescing to the views that you prefer, not because it appears likely, and certainly not out of respect for a teacher or for your elders or for your ancestors because they believed it, so we have to believe it. Not out of respect for teachers. He goes on to say, when you would know for yourself that these things are unhealthy, these things, when entered upon and undertaken, incline towards harm and suffering, then, Kalamas, one should reject them. So that encouragement, empowerment back on us, the listeners, back on you, the listeners, not based on, well, it makes sense to my mind, not based on the scripture says it, not based on a charismatic presentation or a religious doctrine, or because your parents believed it, then you're supposed to believe it. Or when you see for yourself, is it healthy or unhealthy? Does it incline towards harm and suffering? And if it does, you should reject it. I know I'm fond of saying things like shame is always a liar. And so if your, kind of religious or spiritual teachings are making you feel ashamed of who you are, that's unhealthy. That's something to be rejected. If there's a sort of guilt and shame encouragement in the spiritual path. What do you think, Kalamas? When greed, hatred, or delusion arise within a person, does it arise for their welfare or for their harm? For their harm, sir. And when a person has become greedy, hateful, or deluded, their mind consumed by this greed, hatred, and delusion, do they kill living creatures? Do they take what has not been given and go to another spouse and speak what is false and induce others to undertake what is for a long time to their harm and suffering? This is true, sir. What do you think, Kalamas? Are these things healthy or unhealthy? Unhealthy, sir. And when entered upon and undertaken, do they incline towards harm and suffering, or don't they? We agree, sir, that they do. It's all of the greed and hatred and delusion. He's basically going through not abiding by the 5 precepts: killing, lying, stealing, sexual misconduct. And then he goes on, he says, but when you know, Kalamas, for yourself, that these things are healthy, these things, when entered upon and undertaken, incline towards welfare and happiness, then, Kalamas, having come to them, you should stay with them. What do you think, Kalamas? When non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion arise within a person, does it arise for their welfare or their harm? For their welfare, sir. And when a person has not become greedy, hateful, deluded, their mind not consumed by greed, hatred, and delusion, do they kill living beings? Do they take what has not been given? Do they go to another's spouse? Do they speak what's false? Do they induce others to undertake what is for a long time to their welfare and happiness? Unhappiness. This is true, sir. And what do you think? Are these things healthy or unhealthy? They are healthy, sir. And when entered upon and undertaken, do they incline towards welfare and happiness, or don't they? We agree, sir, that they do. That person, Kalamas, who is a follower of the noble path, is thus free of wanting, free of harming, without confusion, clearly conscious and mindful They abide, having suffused in the first direction, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, above, below, and across everywhere in the world, a mind dedicated to loving kindness, compassion, goodwill, equanimity, that is abundant, expansive, immeasurable, kindly, and free of harming. And so Kalamas, the followers of the noble path, whose mind is thus kind and free of harming, their mind is not defiled, but it is purified. There's a lot in that, I feel like for me, the core takeaway of that dialogue that the Buddha is having with these people is trust yourself. Trust your own knowing more than anything else. But it's tricky advice. And he gives all of the examples of like, would you know directly? Because the untrained mind isn't that trustworthy. There's another place, one of my favorite quotes, where the Buddha says something like, in this world, untrained worldlings is a sort of derogatory term that the Buddha uses for people that don't meditate, people that aren't doing introspection, aren't investigating their mind, aren't involved in training the mind. He said, untrained worldlings go around annoying each other with their views and opinions. The lack of training, the lack of wisdom, just sort of like, I have these perspectives and they're, better than yours. My parents believed this, religion taught me this, whatever my subculture taught me, pop culture taught me, and I'd have these views and these opinions not based on, is this healthy or unhealthy? Does this lead to causing harm? Does this lead to loving, is it not questioning, is this coming from loving kindness, compassion, goodwill, equanimity, forgiveness? Not seeing through that lens, but seeing through a self-centered, fear-based view and opinion. So that importance of having the humility, there's last week we did loving kindness. And in the loving kindness sutta, it begins with an encouragement towards being humble. And humility for me, in some way or another, manifests as I might be wrong. Having an attitude and a relationship with your own views and opinions that has that sort of like, I think, because we have to have our perspectives. But having that humility that says, I might be wrong. I think it's like this, but how the fuck do I know? Based on my conditioning, based on this is my view, this is my opinion, but not at the end of that loving kindness teaching, the Buddha says, being freed from fixed views. So having a sort of, you still have your views, you still have your opinions, but not having so much attachment, not being so fixed in, this is true, it will always be true, I'm right, I will always be right. Having that humility of like, this is what I think, but I could be wrong. Even around the Buddha stuff, I think this stuff makes sense. But I'm not gonna, die fighting that my view is better than yours, or that Buddhism is right and everything else is wrong. It's what makes sense to me. I have direct experience that it leads to freedom from greed, freedom from hatred, freedom from delusion, trusting some of the knowing that comes with training and walking the middle path over the years and decades, but not a fixed view, trying not to, having that humility of questioning when we get too tight, even like I brought up reincarnation earlier, and how quickly many people like to dismiss reincarnation, just be like, well, I like Buddhism, I like the mindfulness, I like the practical, focus on compassion, focus on forgiveness, but this whole like reincarnation, no way, and there's dismiss it. There's no way that we have a soul that reincarnates, or a spirit, or a karmic momentum that continues. And that becoming a fixed view, just dismissing the possibility that there's more going on here than we know about or that we understand yet. So questioning religion, questioning teachers, that advice that says, not based on scripture, not based on tradition, but based on try it for yourself. But I feel like we have to say, like, try it for you. Some of you know who Houston Smith is. Houston Smith was a teacher of world religions and a scholar. He taught at UC Berkeley for a long time, wrote a whole bunch of books about spiritual and religious. And he got curious about Buddhism, so he practiced Buddhism for 10 years. And he said, I want to know about this, so let me practice it for 10 years so that I can form a view of it, of meditating every day for 10 years. And then after 10 years, he was like, okay, this has been my experience of 10 years of meditation practice, not a theoretical orientation, but my direct experience with. And then he got really interested in Native American teachings. So he did a decade of Red Road ritual and ceremony and vision quests and sweat lodges and gave it a decade of investigation so that he could have a direct experience of it. And I think he did that with some other spiritual practices as well. And I feel like a decade's sort of a good, I don't know, maybe it's too long, maybe it's not long enough, but after you've been doing something for about 10 years, you have a sense of how it works, rather than like, oh, I read this book and then I decided it was bullshit. It didn't make sense to my conditioned views and opinions, so I rejected it, rather than I directly experienced it for a long period of time. And then I came up with my own knowing. I really appreciate this aspect of Buddhism, the encouragement to question Buddhism itself, question teachers, question the philosophy, question the practices, but the encouragement to do the practices while questioning them, having, and this encouragement to, like, yeah, there's a lot of things worth doubting. There is a whole bunch of false information. There's a whole bunch of fake news. There's a whole bunch of bullshit out there. And maybe this has always been true in the religious realms. People like to make up religions and exaggerate them. And but I feel like we have an even bigger dilemma in the modern time with social media and all of the stuff that's sort of being constantly put at us, and it's so hard to tell what's true and what's not true. Is that, and even the news sources like that we know are so corrupted by greed and hatred and delusion, mainstream media stuff or even alternative media stuff, the encouragement to question it. How do we know who's telling us the truth and who's lying? And I feel like it's pretty easy for us to know we're being lied to a lot. We're being lied to by religions. We're being lied to by news sources. We're constantly being lied to by politicians. We all know that, but we still have to form some views and opinions and try to find out what's true, even though we know so many of the sources are untrustworthy, unreliable. And social media is so seductive. You can really make some cool memes. Or the, self-publishing, the, podcasts, and which podcasts are good and which ones are coming from wisdom and which ones are coming from conditioned confusion, and that mixture of. So questioning the world, questioning religion, questioning politics, questioning news, questioning your parents' views and opinions and the, conditioned, questioning your friends, and maybe most importantly, questioning our own minds. This internal mindfulness as investigative, present time awareness. And in the meditation, I was encouraging you to ask yourself, what is aware? We can, without much training, we can just think like, well, those are my thoughts, so they're probably pretty trustworthy, and just questioning. Why do I believe my mind? What has led me to believe that I'm going to have the correct, authentic wisdom all of the time, especially when you start getting into studying wisdom teachings. Hopefully you start having some humility about our own views and opinions. Why do I believe my inner narrator? I think, am I enlightened? And it's pretty easy to be like, well, I'm not enlightened, so why do I think I'm right all of the time? And that importance of community, of having people in our lives, having teachers that you have some trust, some confidence in, that you also question the teachers, having other people sharing it's one of the things I love about recovery that people that aren't in recovery don't have so easily. It's maybe the place of religion and community for a lot of people, is having people to check in with and be like, hey, this is what my emotions are telling me. This is what my mind is telling me. Can you give me some feedback? Can you be a mirror? Does this make sense? In that Kalama teaching, the Buddha basically saying, run it through the 5 precepts. Is this about killing? Is this about stealing? Is this about lying? Is this sexual? He says, in that sleeping with someone else's spouse, is this about cheating? Is this about some sort of misconduct sexually? My lust is telling me, it'll be okay. Checking in with somebody and saying like, hey, I'm about to do something dishonest. And the way he's boiling it down for the Kalamas, which is it loving kindness? Is this coming from a place of love and kindness? Is this view that I'm holding, this resentment that I'm holding towards people with different political opinions, is it coming from do I have love and kindness? Do I have compassion for people that hold different views? And is my sort of judgment of people that I don't think have enough compassion compassionate? Do people, because it's, obviously we live in a world where there's a lot of ignorance. We're not trying to pretend like being loving and kind doesn't have, there's not a place for discernment. There is sexism, there is racism, there is ignorance, there is, I don't know, I feel like I should probably go off. Sebastian promised me a political rant about Columbus Day. And this fucking lie that we've been told, that the school books told about, like, discovering this, white Italian, whatever, explorer came here and, enslaved and murdered and stole. And we're, sort of celebrating this sort of American myth and delusion. And, a few years ago, they said, hey, this is Columbus Day's bullshit, Native American Heritage Day, that's, we got to acknowledge that, the school books lied to us. The history books were written by the colonizers, and that this is bullshit, and that there's just this history of murder and slavery and oppression. And that's really what is going on in this country. And we need to acknowledge that and not the Eurocentric settlers story that we were taught. That's your cue, Sebastian. So this encouragement to question everything internally, externally. And I don't know about you, and not getting too destabilized in the questioning, because we still have to, even though I hope you know that you can't really trust your mind. I hope you know that. But even though we can't really trust our minds, we still have to make decisions. Even though we're often not coming from a place of wisdom, we still have to show up and do our best with, when you know better, you do better, that saying. Like, with what I know right now, this is the decision, this is the view, this is the opinion, this is the action that I'm going to take with, where I'm at, that humility. So I'll leave it there. Question everything is the encouragement. And questions for me? Please.
I like this part of the TV. It jives with, sort of but then there's also another side where the word faith comes out. I always kind of think about faith as like believing some shit that you can't verify. And then it's like, maybe it comes from a different root or something. Isn't that like the first of the pyramids, and like where it starts before effort and mindfulness is faith, which to me just feels contradictory to the question. Like, how do you reconcile?
Could you hear the question at home?
Not at all.
Okay. So the question about how do we reconcile faith with question everything? And so the term that's translated as faith, I feel like Ramage's sense is something that I share with, that often faith means blindly believing something that may or may not be true. Often faith is used in this, like, just believe it because it's, it's in the book. Believe it, have faith. And the Buddha did something, there is a word, and I don't know what it is in Pali, that's translated as faith. The way that I reconcile it is, rather than faith, confidence. So right after the Buddha got enlightened and he reflected, how did I get here? The way that it's often translated is, I had faith, I did the effort into mindfulness, concentration, and it led to wisdom. But the faith I feel like that he had was, he had confidence that I don't know. It was that sort of like, I don't know the truth about reality, but I'm confident that it's possible to know. I have faith that it's possible to see clearly. I'm not seeing clearly. I'm in self-centered fear. I'm in craving and aversion, resentment, and, I'm not seeing clearly, but I have confidence that maybe if I meditate enough, I have faith that maybe if I meditate enough, maybe if I practice renunciation, I don't engage in misconduct and killing and lying and stealing, that I can come to have a verified understanding, verified faith, faith based in direct experience. And it's sort of that advice that he's giving to the Kalamas there, which is not don't just believe it, but if your direct experience leads to knowing through practice, leads to loving kindness, leads to compassion, leads to non-clinging, unpacks this, then trust your knowing, have faith in your direct experience once your mind has been trained. So confidence rather than blind belief, verified faith rather than just believing it because that's what they told you to believe. I love that the Buddha is saying, don't believe it. Don't even believe him. Don't believe Buddhism. But believe kindness, believe compassion, believe wisdom as you directly experience it.
How about hereafter? Degrassi states that before we were born, there was 1 million years before us, we were nothing. And after we die, 1 million years after, we become nothing again.
Could be.
What do I know?
Could be. A Buddhist perspective is different than, Degrassi's scientific perspective. It's sort of a materialist perspective. And Buddhism has a little bit more of a spiritual perspective that says there's a process unfolding here for millions of years, countless lifetimes, and will continue. And that even nirvana, even if you get off of the wheel of reincarnation, that's also not non-existence. You know, when the Buddha is asked, well, what is enlightenment? What is nirvana? And he just negates our ideas about it. He says it's neither existence nor non-existence. It's neither a consciousness nor a lack of consciousness. He just negates our wanting to create a self around enlightenment. So, but who knows? Maybe the science might be right, but also Buddhism might be right. You know, having that openness. Eric.
So you mentioned that we can't trust our minds, and I'm pretty aware of that. You know? Boy. And so that applies to the Buddha and enlightened beings as well, that they can't trust their minds, but they've done enough work or they've meditated long enough to discern the true from the false. And also when it comes to suffering, you said they're free from suffering. And in my opinion, free is like what's never going to come back, you know what I mean? Or in the same thing, that they just train themselves enough to recognize when they're heading that path.
So is the question, so that I can repeat it in a concise way for people at home, about is there a permanent liberated state?
Yes, when you can trust your mind.
Yeah, or you can trust your, can the Buddha trust, can enlightened beings trust their minds? I think that the answer, the traditional Buddhist view answer is yes. You can come to a place with the mind having been trained so much that you know wholesome thoughts from unwholesome thoughts, you know truth from false, and you have a relationship with your mind where when it does give you some confused thoughts or emotions, you don't believe it anymore. You're no longer, it's not, I don't, some Buddhists would say your mind becomes perfectly enlightened, the mind of a Buddha, only wisdom, no ignorant thoughts ever. That's some traditional Buddhist view. You've heard me talk about, I have a hard time reconciling what the character of Mara is in the Buddha's life. The Buddha said, I've come to enlightenment. I meet all of the pain with compassion. I meet all of the pleasure with non-attached appreciation. I no longer take this body, mind as self, as I, me, or mine. I see clearly. I respond wisely. I don't suffer ever. I am free from suffering. I have a consistent, ongoing ability to meet pain appropriately with compassion. And therefore, I still experience pain, but I don't suffer about it. I still enjoy pleasure, but I don't cling to it and turn pleasure into craving and suffering. That having been said, he said, but this character Mara continues to visit me. And Mara is craving and aversion and resentments and doubts and fears, afflictive emotions, what we call afflictive emotions, the Buddha called Mara. And he said, you know, before enlightenment, Mara, I suffered all of the time when those afflictive emotions would come. I suffered about them. Now, when they arise, I have mindfulness, like, oh, hello, Mara. I see you, Mara. I see doubt. I see craving. I see aversion. I see fear. And I relate to it rather than incarnate as being angry. I see, oh, that's just a thought. That's just an emotion arising and passing. The enlightened ones that have that level of awareness and discernment don't suffer about any of it. But I don't think it perfects the human mind. My own opinion is. I could be wrong about this, but it makes more sense to me. I'm glad that in the scriptures, the Buddha talks about Mara returning even after enlightenment, because it humanizes him for me. You know, he says, I'm perfectly enlightened and I don't suffer about any of this shit. But my paraphrasing is, but my mind still fucks with me sometimes. I still have emotions. I know how to meet my emotions skillfully. I don't take them so personal. I don't, but it didn't get rid, it wasn't a lobotomy. It wasn't a mind wipe. It didn't get rid of difficult emotions. It just changed my relationship to it. I don't take it personal. I meet it with compassion. I see, he says almost every time when Mara comes back, I see you, Mara. This is just afflictive emotions. Discernment. It's not personal. It's not self. If there's any thoughts at home, you can raise your hand in the reactions tab. Please.
Hey, no. So this is something you know I didn't know about Buddhism. So thank you for discussing that. I think it's mindfulness idea. Buddhism is someplace that embraces curiosity, or as we know, religion doesn't. In many ways, and I kept thinking about sitting. The idea of being present in that space, really being of no mind, especially when asking questions. I'm so curious. We talk about how curiosity while sitting, practicing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not that pure trying to think.
Right. You know, we use this term meditation. So the question was about this balance between, you know, an open awareness, mindfulness, where we're not thinking, we're just observing, and this practice of investigation where we're contemplating. There's several different kinds of meditation. There is concentration meditations where we're focusing the attention, we're trying to ignore everything else. We're trying to get single pointed and really get concentrated. And there's not really, in those kind of concentration practices, there's not a lot of room for this kind of inquiry and investigation and contemplation. You're just trying to focus on the breath or on the mantra or on the phrase or on one thing, single pointed focus. And then there's open awareness, where you're not trying to think about it too much either. You're just sort of observing, arising and passing, just observing, making space, open awareness, present time, open awareness. And then there's contemplation meditations, and it's central in the Buddha's teaching. Even the Four Noble Truths, Four Foundations of Mindfulness, are often presented, even though we talk about mindfulness as sort of vipassana insight. The contemplation there is, how is it changing? Contemplating impermanence, contemplating the unreliable or unsatisfactory nature of all conditioned impermanent phenomena. It's an mindfulness is an investigation. The second foundation asks you to contemplate, to think about, to investigate, is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? How is it changing? How is it arising? What's my relation? You know, so you're actually using your mind to think about what's happening in the present, to contemplate it, to investigate it, to question it. So sometimes concentrating, sometimes open awareness, sometimes contemplative, investigative practices. So it depends on what practice you're doing at the time. If you're doing an open awareness practice, don't think about it. If you're doing a concentration practice, don't start thinking about but if you're doing a contemplative practice, use your mind. We train the mind with the mind by thinking about it, by directing the thought and contemplating what's happening moment to moment. So it's an absolutely a part of the meditation offering. Yeah. Maybe that's enough for tonight. It's about time anyways. Don't believe anything I said tonight. Question all of it. Find out for yourself. Check back in 10 years and let me know how it went. Couple of announcements. This coming Sunday, I have a day-long meditation opportunity. You're all invited. We're going to be in this room from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Doing alternating periods of sitting meditation and walking meditation and sitting meditation and walking meditation. I'll give some instructions. I'll give some talks. And at home, everybody's also, I'm doing this for Refuge Recovery, the other organization. It's a virtual day long for Refuge Recovery. But I really want people to be here in the room. I don't like teaching to just the screen and just the nice people at home. I like to be able to guide the people in IRL, as the kids say. You guys don't know what that means, but I do because I got kids. So the day long, you can register for that on refugerecovery.org. It's by donation. Everybody's welcome, regardless of ability to pay. But if you can pay, support Refuge. And for tonight, as I've been doing every Monday night here in the West Side for about 19 years now, the class is offered by donation. But we have overhead, we have expenses, we have a lease to pay, we have electricity to pay, we have employees, as Sebastian's our one employee, we have an employee to pay. So please be generous, please give to support the center. It's in the tradition of Buddhism to not charge, that the teachings are considered priceless. But that doesn't mean free. It means you freely offer to the center to support the teachings. So suggested, don't think about what you pay for yoga. Think about what you pay for fucking movies in this town at this. Think about what you pay for your coffee. Don't donate less than you pay for your coffee. Give what feels appropriate to you. $20, $25, whatever feels appropriate to you. Everyone's welcome, regardless of ability, to donate. What did I forget? Oh, there's like one spot, I think maybe 1 or 2 spots left for this pilgrimage to India 1 month from now. November 13th through 25th, I'm taking about 30 people to India to go to the Buddhist pilgrimage spots. And we're going to be on this train where they're going to take us to all of the different places where the Buddha was born, where the Buddha died, where the Buddha was enlightened, where the Buddha gave some of the important teachings in his lifetime. So we're going on this Buddhist pilgrimage. And there's a couple of possible spots open. If you're interested, you need to get your visas, you need to get your plane tickets, you need to register. We've got about a month before that happens. North Carolina is happening in December, as far as we know. I think that center is going to be open, even though they did get hit with that storm, but that retreat's on as far as we know. All right, may any goodness that comes from our practice be gathered and shared, the merit, the karma, the goodness of our inquiry, our positive intentions, our meditation, be shared with each other, and then offered outward in all directions to share this positive goodwill with all living beings. May each one of us get as free as possible in this lifetime, and together may we create a positive change on the planet. Good seeing everybody.